However, the most dramatic and the most intense story from Peru is actually my story. It involves me. And it's a different kind of robbery. You might not even call it robbery, but I do because robbery or stealing involves using force to take something away from you. And in this case, if it's a police officer or a government official, they're not outright robbing you, but they are using a different kind of force to take something from you. It's more like extortion, but they are using their power to take something away from you that belongs to you. And this all happened when I was leaving Peru at the airport in Lima, and I'm in the airport going through all the different stages heading towards the departure lounge, and then I got pulled out of a lineup and told by these men in uniform with the guns and all of that to follow me. We need to talk to you. And they took me into a room where there was an official sitting behind a desk. I never did understand who these people were, whether he was immigration, whether he was customs, whether he was airport police, I'm not sure. At the time, I assumed a customs agent of some kind because he said, we have to look in your bag. And I had a knapsack like this one, carrying, all of my most important things and my camera, items like that. And he says, we have to search. We have to do a secondary search of your bag. So he took my knapsack, put it on the desk, and he took everything out of it and went over it carefully. And then he took my camera, picked up the camera, put it in front of him on the desk, kind of put his arms around it and said, okay, you are free to go, telling me that I can gather up all my other stuff, put it in the bag, and then I can leave, but he's keeping my camera. And I don't know whether I was an idiot or I guess I was an idiot because I reached over and took my camera back. I'm gathering up all the stuff. I put everything away in my knapsack, and then I kind of looked at my camera behind his arms, and I thought, well, that's my camera. And then I slowly reached over and picked up the camera and put it in my knapsack, kind of gently, like I don't want to spook him or anything. And then I got up and left the office thinking, whew, that was weird. And I figured I had saved my camera. Look who we have over here. If those aren't the happiest creatures you've ever seen in your life. How many have we got here? 4, and then 2 more over there. 6 of them enjoying a cool bath. It's okay, guys, I don't want to disturb you. Oh, this guy is actually tied there with a rope. Can't leave anyway. Time to say goodbye to my Carabao friends, enjoying their bath. So there I was in the airport in Lima, thinking I had successfully saved my camera from the customs officer. And then I was standing in the line to board my plane at the departure lounge. And I'm standing there, and then I get another tap on the shoulder. More men with guns saying, "Can you come with me, sir?" And of course, thinking back, I have to assume they were sent by the guy who tried to steal my camera, and I wouldn't let him. So, of course, they came back for a revenge or a second attempt. I'm sort of joking about this whole situation in Lima, but it developed into a pretty serious situation, and it freaked me out quite a bit at the time. And that was partially because this was actually before I'd been to Guatemala. Now that I think about it, I got the dates screwed up because when I was in Peru, I didn't really speak any Spanish. I really hadn't done much traveling, so I didn't have a lot of experience with officials of any kind. And as a Canadian, we do what we're told. When police tell us to do something, we just do it. That's instinctive. You trust the police. And when they give you instructions or ask you to pull over in your car and show your ID, do whatever, you don't argue with the police, you just do what you're told. So that was my mindset when I was in Peru. And these guys in the airport, it's one of the more official places you can possibly be. You're not about to argue with men with guns. So they tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Come with me, sir." And they took me into a bathroom there. And everybody was cleared out of the bathroom and they blocked the door. So it was just me and these men with guns. And they took my backpack off me and everything. And then they stripped me naked. That's part of this whole story. Took off all of my clothes. And then they started sort of bouncing me off the walls inside the bathroom a little bit, threatening to beat me. And they were semi-beating me to an extent. And then they forced me to the ground and forced me to do push-ups for as long as I could until I was exhausted. And while I was doing the push-ups, they kept crouching down and then threatening to punch me and kick me. So they were just sort of like waving their legs in my face and their feet in my face and then threatening to beat me and kick me in the head while I'm doing the push-ups. And I had no idea what was going on. No clue. They didn't speak English very well, if at all. And eventually, after the whole push-up stuff, they dragged me back to my feet. And then they at the time, I had a full beard and a mustache, which might have been one of the reasons I got in so much trouble, because I looked the part, I guess. And they kept pointing to my mustache and they kept saying, "Cocaína, cocaína," basically saying, I'm a drug user or I'm smuggling drugs. I have something to do with drugs, because they say they see cocaine powder on my mustache, you know, cocaína, cocaína. And they're making this entire thing up just as a way to extort money. But I'm so dumb at that time, I'm so stupid that I don't realize that's what these guys want. They just want money. And they're doing all this theatrics to get money out of me, and then they'll let me go. But I didn't know that. I'm just doing whatever they tell me, you know, kind of scared out of my mind about what's going on. Then eventually, I can't remember what happened. They sort of indicated they wanted me to take out my wallet and show them something. So I got my wallet out of my pants. Why they didn't just do this, I don't know. It's almost like there's a code of ethics among official thievery. They can't just rob you. They can't just take money out of your pockets, even though that's what they're doing. Technically, they're just robbing you. But what they wanted me to do is take out my own wallet, open it up to show them the money inside. And then once I was showing them whatever money was in the wallet, they just reached in, took out all the money, and then handed me my wallet and then said I was free to go. So that's what they wanted the whole time. But they didn't just steal it. They had to create this situation where it appeared like I was giving it to them. And maybe that's part of their moral code. And one part of this story I skipped over is, of course, my girlfriend at that time was worried about me because armed men had taken me away into this room and I never came out again. And they were waiting and waiting for me. You know, people were on the plane were waiting for me. It was going to take off. And she spoke to a bunch of people out there and convinced a priest to go in and try and see what was happening in that room, in that bathroom. So this priest came in the middle of all this that was happening to me, and the police threatened him. They grabbed hold of the priest, kind of bounced him around and started taking his clothes off. They were kind of going to rip his robe off and whatever else he was wearing. And then he was freaked out and he just got out of the bathroom. And he said, "Oh, there's nothing I can do to help this guy." And he turned around and left. And eventually, of course, I was able to get dressed again without my money and go outside and get on the plane and fly back to Canada. And it's a very clever scheme from the point of view of the officials, because they're targeting people who are leaving the country. They're not going to do this to someone who's arriving, because if I'm now in Peru, I can go complain and make complaints and track them down and point them out. But I'm just so grateful to get out of the country and not end up in a Peruvian prison that obviously I'm not going to get them in trouble because I'm on my way out of the country. So yeah, that was my experience of Peru. Yeah, that was quite an experience. And I remember years later, actually it was in Guatemala again, after my time in Peru, I happened to see the movie, what is it called? I knew I was going to tell this story, so I should remember the name of this movie. It's the story of that American who was arrested for smuggling drugs in Turkey. Midnight Express, I think it's called. And he ended up in a Turkish prison. And the movie, based on my experiences in Peru, in the airport, watching that movie and seeing what happened to this poor guy in prison, or at least it's a dramatization of what really happened to him, freaked me out so much when I saw that movie. It was like, yeah, I'm very glad I got out of that bathroom just poorer, and I actually got out. Again, the weird thing is, though, I mean, I think they targeted me because of the way I looked. I was young, and I had this crazy beard and mustache, and obviously I didn't look like someone who had a lot of power or influence. But at the same time, a person like that isn't going to have any money either. I mean, I barely had enough money to go to Peru on this trip, and I wasn't returning to Canada with any money, so whatever money I had in my wallet that they took did not amount to very much. So all of that performance, all of that effort just to take what little money I had when I was practically broke, it's, yeah, very strange experience. For my next theft experiences, I have to jump ahead quite a bit in time, because after my time in Peru and Guatemala, I at some point flew to South Korea, started a whole new life there, teaching English for 6 months or a year at a time, and then leaving Korea and going traveling. And then I'd return to Korea, work for 6 months or a year, save up money, then go traveling again. And I did that for a decade. And on my very first trip out of South Korea, I ended up in Hong Kong at some point. It was the first time I'd been anywhere, really. I'd never been to Hong Kong before. I'd never been to Thailand before. Never been anywhere. So there I was in Hong Kong for the first time. And I was staying at the Chungking Mansions. And I think, again, a lot of people will know the Chungking Mansions, especially from the 90s. Very famous place. Perhaps it's still as extraordinary today as it was back then. But Chungking Mansions is a crazy collection of these high apartment buildings that are all interconnected with bizarre hallways and then courtyards in the middle filled with garbage. And every single floor is like a slice of the world, with restaurants and hotels and like guest houses and apartments filled with kind of people from every corner of the globe doing everything you can imagine. It has a very Blade Runner-ish kind of feel, you know, Chungking Mansions. So I was in Chungking Mansions, staying there at a typical budget hotel, a couple dollars a night, whatever it cost. And in my room, I happened to open the drawer of the little desk in my room, and there was a Lonely Planet guidebook for China. And I sort of took that as an omen that, oh, that's where I should go next. I should go to China, because I found this guidebook in my room. And I had this idea that I'd head into China. There's an area there pretty close to Hong Kong, Yangshuo, very beautiful area, very popular again with backpackers and travelers. And I thought I could do a loop through there and then return to Hong Kong somehow. And instead of taking all of my stuff with me, I decided, of course, to repeat my experience in Guatemala. And I asked the owners of my guest house, of my hotel, if they had a storage facility. Could I leave my backpack here with all my heavier items and not just go into China with a smaller bag, travel around, and then return and pick up my backpack when I get back to Hong Kong? And they said, yeah, absolutely. We have that service. You know, you can leave it with us and we will take care of it. And then you can come back, stay here again, pick up your backpack. Yeah. So, of course, later, much later, however long it was later than I thought, because I stayed in China longer than I'd anticipated. And I made my way back to Hong Kong eventually, went back to this guest house, went up to the desk, and they said, backpack? We don't know anything about a backpack. What backpack? So that was the second entire set of gear that I lost because I left it in storage somewhere. And you'd think I would learn my lesson after that, but I guess I'm so disorganized that I keep leaving things in storage all over the globe. And it usually works out, to be honest. I've done it many times since then, and everything is fine. And again, I left all my stuff in storage in Kuala Lumpur again, and everything there is fine. But yeah, I did get, I did run into trouble a couple of times. Like, backpack? What is this backpack you speak of? We've never heard of such a thing. You may look, we have no backpacks here. And everything was gone once again. I've reached an intersection on my countryside walk, and I think that direction takes me back towards Mesot. This direction behind me is where I just came from, and that leaves a third direction, which takes me a little bit further away. And I think I'm going to head this way just for a little while, see where it goes, and then I can turn around and come back. I don't feel quite ready to head back into the city yet. And I still have more stories to tell. For my next stories of robbery and pickpockets, we're shifting parts of the world again and going to Ethiopia. Ethiopia was one of my first big bike tours that I went on. Again, using the same bike that I have today. I bought this bike back in 1999 to go to Ethiopia. So there I was in Addis Ababa, first time in Africa, amazing country. If anyone ever wants my advice on where they should go in the world to have an interesting experience, Ethiopia will always be near or at the top of my list. An incredible country. But there I was in Addis Ababa riding my bike around the city, just exploring on a bicycle instead of on foot. And at one point, I was riding my bike, and yeah, actually I met this other foreigner. He was on foot. So I stopped my bike and I got off my bike and I was walking along beside this other foreigner. We were chatting. So I wasn't riding, I was just pushing my bike along. And then suddenly all these children came out of nowhere. I mean, Ethiopia is filled with children, they're everywhere, and they're always coming out of nowhere. But there was something quite different about this crowd, and this crowd of kids came up to me, and they're asking questions in English. Where are you from? And they're saying, give me money, give me one burr, give me pen. And they're kind of pawing at things on my bicycle, seeing if they can sort of grab something. Just a lot of kids around me, a lot of chaos. But it was still sort of under control. This was a normal situation for Ethiopia, to be honest. And then out of nowhere, as if there was a signal, and I'm pretty sure there was a signal, all of these kids went nuts. They grabbed my bicycle and started shaking it as hard as they could from side to side. One kid, the biggest kid, grabbed the handlebars of the bike, and then he kind of reared back and lifted his leg off the ground, and then just started slamming the heel of his foot into my thigh as hard as he could, just like kicking and kicking and kicking as hard as he could. And they started screaming. These kids just started shouting and screaming and shaking the bike, and this guy's slamming his heel into my leg. And I'm looking around thinking, they've lost their mind. These kids have gone insane. What is going on? And this went on for a few seconds. And then again, like a signal, everything stopped and they scattered. They all just ran in different directions. And I'm looking at the other foreigner, this guy I met. I think he was from Denmark, anyway. Looking at him in amazement, and we're both just wondering, what was that all about? Like, what was going on? These kids, were they insane? Do you have any idea? Did you ever experience anything like that? And we're both astonished. We had no idea what just happened. And then we continue on together, and this Danish guy and I were going to pop into a little cafe, have a cold drink, and continue chatting, get to know each other because we just met. Two, backpackers exchanging stories. And as we're going into this cafe, I kind of reach down to my pants to feel where my wallet is. And of course, you knew where this story was going. You're smarter than me, I'm sure. My wallet was gone. So that whole thing with the kids was basically a big distraction for them to get close enough, and they picked my pockets, and they basically took whatever they could out of my pockets, and that included my wallet. So I had no money to pay for the drinks at the at the cafe. The lucky side to this story, and it's actually kind of a lesson, I think, for being overseas, is that at some point when you go from your home country to another country, you have to reassess how you carry things. Back in Canada, in my wallet, I carry everything. I've got my debit card and credit card and driver's license and ID. I've got tons of money. I've got address. You know, my wallet is full of valuable and important things. But of course, when you're in Ethiopia, you don't need any of those things. You don't have to carry around your driver's license and your credit card and debit card. You certainly don't need to keep them in your wallet in your pocket. A lot of people wouldn't even carry a wallet because a wallet is a target for a theft. And they keep their money, you know, in a pouch around their neck or something. I don't go super crazy about security. But the thing you need to do at some point is do a mental assessment and switch over from home country mode to overseas mode. And I had done that in Ethiopia like 2 nights before, maybe even the night before this incident. I hadn't done it in Canada because I was so busy packing up my bike and getting my gear ready that I never got around to thinking about security. So when I landed in Ethiopia, I had my regular Canadian wallet with all of my stuff still in it. But just the night before, or 2 nights before, I sat down in my room at my guest house in Addis Ababa, and I took everything out. So I took out all of my ID and bank cards and cash. I took everything of value out of my wallet, and I just had just enough money left in my wallet to get me through the next day. So when these kids successfully picked my pocket and got my wallet, they didn't actually get anything. They got a little bit of money, and that's all. So I didn't lose anything of value. So, wow. Beautiful area. I assume you can see a fair amount of it behind me, but I'll flip the camera and get me out of the frame for a few seconds. I'm looking at the screen on the GoPro now, and it doesn't look nearly as dramatic on the screen as it does to me in real life, but hopefully some of what it's like right here comes across. Once again, you're looking into the border regions with Myanmar over there. Rice fields looking pretty well grown. Get a nice close-up of some of the rice. After that incident with the boys, the pickpockets, I had a lot of similar experiences. I couldn't go anywhere on my bike. I had pannier bags on my bike, and I favor pannier bags that have a lot of pockets and compartments. So everywhere I went, the kids would crowd around my bike, and they would just try to unzip all the pockets and steal anything they could out of all the pockets. So for all of you cyclists out there and thinking about what kind of pannier bags to buy, I do like the ones with pockets, but they are a lot harder to secure in some countries, and then it might be better to go with something like the Ortlieb, which is just one big compartment and you seal the whole thing. It's a lot harder to get things in and out of an Ortlieb pannier bag, but it also makes it a lot harder for thieves to get anything in and out of them. And in Ethiopia, it got to the point where I had to buy little padlocks for every single zipper on every compartment and pocket on all of my pannier bags. I had to put a zipper on every compartment, a lock on every zipper, because people were just trying to steal things from the bags so often. And I ended up with what felt like 10 pounds of padlocks jangling on all of my pannier bags on my bike. So that was not much fun. But Ethiopia could be challenging, not just because of the pickpockets and the kids trying to steal things. Oh boy, the kids made a huge game out of my towel, because if I took a shower in the morning and my towel was wet, you don't want to pack it away in your pannier bags, right? So I'd strap it to the back of my bike with a bungee cord or something, and that towel flapping around on my bike was just irresistible to the children of Ethiopia. And they would come pouring onto the streets and run after me, run after my bicycle. And then when they got close to my bike, they all made a huge game out of trying to dive in and snatch my towel and run away with it. No one ever got the towel. So I'm very proud of myself that way. No kid ever got away with my towel. But there is another side to Ethiopia where robbery was more the norm than pickpockets. And there was one memorable occasion, there were several, but I'll tell one in particular, where I was riding my bike in the mountains, kind of in a remote area, kind of like this, countryside area. And a large group of men attacked me with sticks, because everyone in Ethiopia in the countryside carries a stick made of a kind of iron wood. They call it a dula. And this dula, you know, they use it to drive animals. They can hit the back of the animal, and they use it as a walking stick. They use it a lot of different ways. So everybody in the countryside has a dula. And I suddenly found myself facing this big crowd of grown men on this countryside road, and they're all standing there holding doulas. And they basically said, okay, hand it over, you know, hand over the bike, hand over the stuff. We are here to rob you. And I was in no mood for that. I was just not in the mood to be robbed that day. So I decided to fight back. And I drew on my inner Hulk. I mean, I really kind of went, you know the TV series Archer? I just started watching season 11, just coming out now. And Archer is all about the rampage. He goes into rampage mode. This was long before I'd even heard of Rampage and Archer, but there I was in Ethiopia, and I went full rampage. And when these men came at me with their sticks, I fought back, had my bike kind of on a kickstand, so it was standing upright. And the very first man that came at me, he was quite a bit smaller than me, so I managed to overpower him, and I grabbed his dula. So I now had my own weapon, and I used that dula, you know, to beat off all these men who were coming at me. And I was screaming at the top of my lungs, going full rampage, shouting at these guys and attacking them. And basically, I drove them off. And I think I drove them off more with the intensity of my attack, much more so than my fighting skills, of which I have none. But it was just the ferocity that I brought to the fight. I think that just terrified them. They had no idea that this mild-mannered Canadian cyclist could summon a rampage like that. And they backed off and they left me alone. And then the guy, the very first guy, he actually had the nerve to ask for his dula back. I was still holding on to his dula, and he said, you know, that's mine, you know, that's my stick, give me my stick back. And of course I just said, nah, sorry, this is my dula, this is mine now. And almost the rest of the time that I was in Ethiopia, I kept that dula with me. I found a way to mount it on my bike, and I used it to beat off dogs. And I think it was helpful as a deterrent to future robbery attempts, because I think people in the countryside would see me on the bike, and then they would see my stick kind of sticking out from my pannier bags, and maybe that deterred, you know, some robbery attempts, because they saw I had my own dula and I could fight back. But to be honest, that was probably pretty ridiculous, because in the countryside there were also a lot of guns, like AK-47s, things like that. And there were enough guns in evidence everywhere that if someone really wanted to rob me, I would have been robbed. You know, they would have stuck a gun in my face, and there would have been, you know, nothing I could have done about it. And luckily, it never came to that. The worst was the dula attack, which I won with my rampage. Very proud of myself for that one. To be honest, the small theft attempts never really stopped in Ethiopia the whole time I was there, from the point of view of children running after me and trying to grab things and then run away with them. People even coming into my rooms at times. I would go into some small guest house in a village somewhere, and the doors wouldn't lock properly. But I would go in there with my bike, and I'm unpacking all of my gear, and then out of nowhere the door would fly open, and a bunch of people would come into my room, just uninvited, and they wander around my room and look at the stuff, and they start picking things up and saying, you know, give me, give me. You know, they basically treat my room like it's a garage sale. And I think this happened because they're so used to foreigners, you know, NGO people and even tourists showing up in Ethiopia and then just handing out things, handing out money and pens and notebooks and balloons and candy or anything else, so that when they saw me on my bicycle, they just sort of decided to take a chance and see whether the stuff in my room was available too. Or I would sit outside, and I'd like to sit, have a cup of tea and write in my journal or look at my maps. And then people would just come up to me while I'm writing and just pluck the pen out of my hand, like just take it or pick up the map and then say, me? Give me, mine, you know? They just want to, you know, take it. So I eventually had to stop doing that. I couldn't even write in my journal in public because of that. But there was one other time in particular I remember where things got physical. Luckily, this wasn't a full-on attack by a group of men. It was just one man. And I was on a very remote mountain road, very farming country, very narrow. And I'm riding along, going very slowly because it was very steep and very rough. It wasn't a paved road back in those days. And this guy, I assume he lived near there, a farmer perhaps, came running out of the fields nearby or running out of the bush on the hill, wherever he was. And then he came running onto the road and he blocked my way and he basically wanted my stuff. Whatever was in my bags, he's like, that's mine now, give it to me. And he wouldn't let me pass. So I tried to sort of edge around him slowly, and then he would get in front of me and grab my handlebars and just hold me there and say, no, you know. And he'd start grabbing at my handlebar bag and other things, trying to rob me, basically. And I tried to go by him many times, and he wouldn't let me go past. So finally, I didn't go rampage, but I'd had enough. And I slowly got off the bike, kind of with a big sigh. You know, it was like, oh, for Pete's sake. And I put down the kickstand, I leaned the bike onto the kickstand, and I walked around to this guy at the front of my bike. And again, he was, you know, about this tall. I assume he was strong. He was a farmer and lived his life doing manual labor. But perhaps I was summoning rampage strength, because I kind of grabbed him by the arms, moved him away from the bike, and sort of that physical motion of grabbing someone kind of makes you want to do more. And then I just picked him up and just threw him to the side. And I guess I used a bit more strength than I realized, because this poor guy, he was like Superman. There was this moment where I caught him in the air after I threw him and I realized what I had done, and he was just soaring through the air like Superman and went over the edge of the road where there's kind of a drop off, and then he kind of hit the ground and then went bouncing down this little bit of a slope there. So that was the other time I had to kind of physically fight back in order to protect my bicycle and my belongings. That poor guy, I think about him all the time, and that kind of image he had as I threw him and he just sort of soared through the air. He must have been a little bit astonished when that happened. There were other moments that could have been serious. I remember one time going downhill. This is a rare stretch of paved road in the mountains, and I was going downhill, and I'd picked up quite a bit of speed, and off ahead of me were some men, laborers or farmers, and they were carrying on their shoulders these long branches. I think they were bamboo that they had cut down somewhere and they were taking home. And they looked back and they saw me coming down the hill. And just as I came up even with them, one of the guys swung around with the bamboo, like a long thing of bamboo that was pointing out ahead of him. And then he turned and swung it along the road, aiming it for me as I'm going past. And I guess the idea was to, you know, basically just knock me right off the bike. And I assume this was part of a robbery attempt as well. Why else would he do this? Luckily, I saw it coming. I just saw this big hunk of wood coming at me, and then I ducked down really fast, like tight over the handlebars, and that bamboo just like whooshed right over the top of my head, and it missed me. So that was a lucky break on my side, on my part. And for stories from Ethiopia, I guess I will wind it up there. Here is the view around me. But even with the help of Google Maps, I don't really know where I am. But luckily, I've got the mountains of Myanmar always pointing in the direction. I think I just have to go in this direction, and I'll be following along the border And whatever road I end up on, I will eventually head back into Mesot if I go this way. And I assume at some point my phone will hook up with the satellites again, and I'll get my position with the GPS on my phone.